Hey everybody, welcome back to American History class with Mr. Finn. Today we are continuing our story of the beginning of the Revolution, and today we're actually going to start with fighting. If you remember in our story up until this point, England had been trying to tax the colonies, and the American colonists are saying, no, 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 we want to be part of your government. We need representation in Parliament, which is England's Congress. And we'll be happy to pay taxes, but we need someone to represent us to tell us, or to tell England what we need here in the colonies. England, on the other hand, is saying, no, 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 you guys are just colonists. You are not English citizens. You don't have those rights. You just have to do what we say. And we've started to see this conflict with the Stamp Act. We had the Boston Massacre, the Boston Tea Party, all of these things. And now the key word for all of that that's important for us is this: Boston. We hear a lot about Boston in this early time. Well, the reason is because Boston is going to be the center of the Patriot reaction to the English. Now, the English in the South, a lot of the people that lived in the southern colonies are like, hey, things are good. We're cool with the British. They're buying our stuff. We're still making money. We're good. But in the North, you're going to see a lot of these feelings of, patriotic feelings. So we are patriots. We are for America. We are starting to turn against the British. We don't like what they're doing. And no place has stronger feelings than in Boston. And Boston is actually where the coercive acts were done, which shut down Boston Harbor. There was the Quartering Act, where British soldiers would have to stay in the houses of the people living there. They shut down their colonial governments. So people in Boston are like, yo, you just took away all of our stuff. Like, we are now prisoners, basically, in our own town. And the rest of the colonies are kind of like, man, this isn't cool, but it's not really affecting us. But let's get back on track. Now, part of these feelings that are happening in Boston are going to lead to an event called Lexington and Concord, which you have looked at already. And the start of this is really going to come from weapons. The people who are living in the Boston area and the outskirts are going to be very suspicious of what England is doing. They're going to feel like they're taking away their liberties and their freedoms. And so what is the only solution for them is to start to collect weapons, gather weapons, have them in case England continues to go down this path of basically shutting down Boston. If you're going to take my liberties and my freedoms away, I need to be ready. And the way that they are saying they're going to be ready is by having a storage of weapons in case fighting does break out. Now, let's get to this. The British are going to hear that these militiamen, meaning the people who are just townspeople living on the outskirts, and especially in Lexington and Concord, have gathered a large store of weapons. They have a lot of weapons and guns and cannons and stuff. And the British are like, whoa, 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 this is not cool, it's not allowed. We hear that it's at Lexington and Concord, so we are going to march to Lexington and Concord. And so the British military marches to these two surrounding outskirts, these small towns of Lexington and Concord, and they get there. And they're like, all right, where are the weapons? We need to find them, so start searching everything. But the militia had already heard that they were coming. They got there first. They got most of the weapons, if not all the weapons, out of Lexington and Concord. So the British found nothing except one thing, which were the Minutemen, or the militia. The militia, again, if you don't remember, are just townspeople. These are shopkeepers and farmers and just the people who live here, and they have their guns, and they go out to this field at Lexington and Concord, and they stand there, and the British military is there, and they have a standoff. And they're across the field staring at one another. Now, all wars during this time in fighting happen where people would line up on one side, people would line up on the other side, and then they would have their guns, and they would face each other in lines. The reason for this it goes back for military tactics. This is the way wars had always been fought. The weapons themselves were not very advanced. So if you were shooting your musket, it might go this way, that way. Everyone's in a line. We try and, shoot at you. You try and shoot at us. Whoever's up at the end is going to win. So they're standing across from each other, the militia on one side and the British military on the other side. And again, militiamen are just people, just like me and you, just random people, not like trained in the military. They just are people with guns that are going to defend their town, and they're standing across from the greatest military in the world. The British military had been in wars on all continents, well, not all continents, not, Antarctica and things like that, but from Australia to Asia and Europe, everywhere, the British military had been fighting. They were trained well. This is the strongest military in the world, standing across the field from, me. That's not going to go good. This would have been an incredibly scary thing for the militia to be standing there across from the British military. It would have been terrifying. So, what happens? Well, let me say this. On April 19th, 1775 at Lexington and Concord, we don't know. We don't know what happens. We know that a shot is fired, but we, in the history, we don't know who did it or what side fired first. It has been lost to history. We're not sure. But if we had to guess, who do you think would fire first? The well-trained military who follows orders and never does anything they're not supposed to? Or a bunch of random people with guns who have no training, no nothing? My guess, and I don't know, my guess is that probably someone on the British side would not have just opened up fire. If you're in the military, you follow your orders to a T. You never just go off the script. You only do what you're told. So more than likely, if I'm guessing, I'm saying it's someone on the militia side who either fired their gun up or misfired or did something, and that caused a skirmish to begin. So upon that fighting, what's going to happen is the British and the militia are going to square off across from a field, and the British military, will fire on the militia. Now, as they fire on the militia fire back some shots, but in the end, the militiamen are just people like you and me. Like I said, if the British military is lining up, marching towards you with bayonets, which are the knives on the end of their muskets, and firing at you, what do you think is going to happen? What would you do? Run. Exactly. That's what I would do too. So the British military is coming at you, the best military in the world. The militiamen do exactly what we would do. They turn around and run for the hills, get out of there. In the end, we're going to see 8. Let's say, I'll do it by militia. 8 unhappy dead face. 8 militiamen will be killed in, action. But it doesn't stop there. To finish this story of what happens at Lexington and Concord, the importance of which is that the military for England has now marched on militiamen, people living in the Boston area. But as the British military starts its march back to Boston, what's going to end up happening is everyone's going to hear about this in the surrounding towns, the smaller ones, and they're going to come flooding out of the woods, and they're all going to have their guns. There's other militia that meet up. The British will be marching back to Boston in lines, and as they're going down the paths to get back to Boston, these militiamen who had come out of the woodwork hearing about Lexington and Concord are going to be hiding behind trees, and they're going to start shooting at the British. And so the British, on their entire march back to Boston, are going to deal with the militiamen shooting at them from the woods, not in a battle, not in a conflict, but they're just going to be basically picking them off. Now, we have 8 militiamen die. On the British side, in the end, we get to almost 300 who are going to be unhappy dead faces, wounded or missing. So, Lexington and Concord is a win for the British, but they're technically going to lose way more men, either to injury, missing, or have been killed in action. So, the the moral of this story today is that, well, not really the moral of the story, but the explanation of the story, the importance of it, is that Lexington and Concord is going to start the path to major war. We're going to start to see George Washington, who you've probably heard of before, get involved in the military now. We're going to have the other colonies start to see that the British are not going to go away. They're taking individual liberties. They've killed people at the Boston Massacre. They've shut down Boston. They have now fired on militiamen in Lexington and Concord. People are going to start to say, I think we have to do something. We can't just say, oh, it doesn't affect me, it's only Boston, because now it's affecting everybody. They say, hey, we're American too. Is that going to happen to us? And so we'll move on from Lexington and Concord next class, but the important thing to understand is that, hey, we have hit it. By 1775, the British are showing they are going to drop an iron fist. They will use the military on the colonists if need be, and the colonists are going to come together to form their, not really a country at this point, but they're going to form their opposition to the British. Today is our Thomas Day. Thomas, we have two Thomases that you're going to look up today for your assignment. One is Thomas Paine. The other is Thomas Jefferson. These are two important people who both wrote very important documents that you were going to look at. And you might know this, you might not know already. Let me get out of your way. I want you to look up Thomas Paine, and I want you to look up Thomas Jefferson. The question is, what did each write? Question mark. Both of them wrote something very important during this time period as the war is getting started. And I want you to find out which one, what each wrote, and then tell me about it. Let's give me the, let's say a description. All right? So you're going to give me a description. It can be short. I mean, let's just say a half page each, just explaining what they are. You can always go back to the 5 W's, who, what, where, when, and why. What are the documents that they wrote? Tell me a brief summary of what they are. Why were they important? You can even tell me some of the parts of it if you find examples online. But again, pretty short. Two Thomases, Thomas Paine, Thomas Jefferson. Who are they? What they write? Make sure you do it today because that's how you get your attendance and your participation. But again, just so you can see, Thomas Paine, Thomas Jefferson, and I look forward to seeing what you guys have. Thanks.